Hello and welcome. Another ladder race and another incredible lineup. As you see here, we got the Dirty Crabs versus Rhino, and they are furious. And so, as we get ready to kick off here, everybody in the pen getting lined up, ready to go. We were absolutely ready for this on the Outer Scotland course, 2 laps, which I gotta say is quickly becoming one of my favorite courses, the Scotland area. Not only because of the short, steep climbs, but the rolling terrain and flat-ish course. It really does have a lot to offer for someone like me who can't quite do long climbs just yet. And so as we get ready to get rolling, we see that Brian Hampton on the Rhino team has his own plans.
I'm free. Free.
He launched out of the gate, and oh my God, that set us going. We immediately were on the chase, going, essentially 400 watts out the gate and trying to come together. And as we get back together, you see that we just start kind of rolling through. Everybody is on the, just rolling, not trying to push too hard, but at the same time, still keeping the pace a little bit hard through these climbs. You can see we become a little bit detached, but me and Riz start to push forward, and that brings us back on terms. And so as we get through this hill here, we want to make sure that we're controlling the race, but at the same time not doing a lot of work. That is the name of the game when it comes to these ladder races. As I'm finding out, this being my second ladder race, you want to work, but at the same time, there's an element of control and an element of, letting the other team, do the work, set the pace. But if they're not gonna, if they're just gonna take it easy, then, we want to take control and set our own pace. And so as we come through downhill, getting ready to go through the corkscrew climb, this is where we first started looking at our pace and seeing that someone starts to go up the front. So we all, really just dig in deep to make sure that we all come to the top of this climb together, which we did. And I feel like that was their first kind of like their first initiation of challenging us to see where we're at, see whether or not we're willing to race. Now, they have a super strong rider in Pavlnik, and she is an absolute monster when it comes to racing. I've not raced with her before, or not, seen her in a race, but I can tell you that in this race, I found out very quickly, she is an absolute monster when it comes to riding. As I showed in the beginning, her 20-minute power is about 4 watts per kilogram, which really meant that we were going to have to work if she went off the front. And right now, it's Streeter and Chang that went off the front. They start to attack, so we kind of come on terms and really push to get back together. Because again, we didn't want to, let them go too far off the front, especially with that, second, third, fourth kind of place group. We wanted to make sure we all stay together, and of course, we all end up coming back together as we get into Glasgow. Which this is really where, lap 2 is really where everything started to happen in terms of the race tactics. So as we start to round the corner here into the Clyde kicker, I didn't realize this at the time, but I ended up setting a new PR on the Clyde kicker. And as we start to push through, Craig, I believe it was, who was de-essing us, if I remember correctly, he was just like, hey, just, put the pressure, get up to the top, let's see what happens. And so sure enough, we all push and, push hard up over the climb. And as I get to the top, he's telling us to just keep going, keep the pressure on. It looks like, we dropped one of their riders. And so that was our cue to just kind of keep going forward, even though, as I round the corner, I'm doing 200 watts. But again, I like this, this part of the circuit because this little downhill, you can build just enough momentum to then really push hard on the second hill. And usually, anyone that struggles on the Clyde kicker is going to struggle even more on this second hill. And so that's where I like to push a little bit harder, give me a little bit of a distance right now. Only got a couple seconds gap on the group, so not really too far ahead. Um, and so Greg is just telling us to keep rolling as Barry comes through, and Pavlinick, sorry. And so as Pavlinick comes through as well, we start to come together, and looking at the way the group is right now, it's basically all of our riders and there too, and we've got a 5 second gap to the next Rhino rider, and then an 8 second gap beyond that. And so this 5 versus 2 scenario, we're like, okay, this could work if we don't slow down. And that really became the theme of the start of this second lap was we cannot slow down if we want to take control of this race. And so as we start to come through this hill, we put another dig in to, again, see where they're at, see whether or not the two Rhino riders are going to push hard. And as we come up over the top, you see all 5 of our guys there, but as expected, the Rhino riders start coming through. And so they're not going to let go. But thankfully for us, we've got a 2 second, or sorry, 12, 13 second gap to the next set of Rhino riders. And, we're basically, you know, this group of 7 right here is it. We're continuing to build our lead, continuing to build the gap between us and the riders behind us. We know that if they're going to catch up, they're going to have to work exceptionally hard. We're not going to let them just we're not going to ease our pace and let them, catch up to us. So we just keep rolling, keep pushing through, and make sure that we don't let our pace down. Now we've got, again, Craig on Discord letting us know, like, hey, start taking 30-second turns, push up to the front, and just keep the pace strong. And so we're all doing our best to kind of hold a strong enough pace to keep the momentum moving forward. As well as you saw, I kind of steered into the wind there for a second, which pushed me towards the back, but thankfully I didn't fall off. I did finally kind of fix my steering issues, but that's a separate story. And so as we come together, again, our focus was, because we come primarily from a time trial team, our focus was using our time trial skills and taking 30-second turns to just keep the pace hard, keep pushing forward, and making sure that, we can grow the distance between us and the riders behind us. Right now, we're sitting at about 25 seconds, which, while it may not be impossible to for them to bridge, obviously in the first race, for my first ladder race, I bridged the almost 30-second gap. Now, I wasn't chasing down a group that was doing an average of 3.5 watts per kilogram or 4 watts per kilogram off the front. They were going a lot slower. So I was able to bridge that gap. In this case, we are making it near impossible to bridge, and that's kind of the goal. And so you see, I start to slip a little bit off the back, which I kind of get, scared for a second there because I didn't want it to fall too far behind. So I gave a little bit of a dig to catch up. You see Riz come up behind me, so we can kind of stay together. And, that's basically what we're, that's where we're at. This is where our race is at now, is stay together, keep the pressure on the two riders, kind of planning out where we want to, attack, because we want to see where their where their energy is at. I kind of look at it as, depending on where someone uses their power up, tells me they're whether or not they're good, whether or not they have the energy to kind of press on, or if they're hurting. And so as you saw, the riders, we all kind of used our power up before that banner because we knew we would get a new power up. As much as I enjoyed my arrow power ups previously, I got a draft van, which I think in this case was a little bit better since we have a big enough group. You see Riz push off the front. The Bernie Rhino rider starts to follow. Um, and then the second Rhino rider starts to push through. And so we all kind of keep the momentum going. And again, our focus will stay together as a group, because us having 5 riders, we basically can control this race. We can slow it down or speed it up however we want. And so as we come up the corkscrew, we knew that Pavlik was going to push hard, her being a little bit lighter rider, but also strong on the climbs. We knew that if she pushed hard, she could potentially get away. You see, Bernie starts to push. Bernie was actually the one that ended up pushing hard. But you see Pavlik kind of come up like a steam engine and just literally Rhino on through. Like she just, blasted through us, kept the pressure on. And we didn't want to let her go. We did not want to let her go. We didn't want her taking first place because we knew that she was a strong enough rider, especially with a 4 watt per kilogram, 20-minute power. We knew she could press on and get away if we let her. But Streeter's got a 4 watt per kilogram, 20-minute power, and so we knew that we had the engines to keep control of this race. It was just a matter of the tactics to make it happen. Again, looking at the riders behind us, we got almost a 50-second gap. So they're not gonna, they're not coming up. We got another, looks like Rhino rider, 3-second gap, off the back. Or is that one of our guys? Sorry. No, it looks like we're all still together. Um, and so you see Trainer come through, which I gotta say, he is an absolute diesel engine. Man, oh man, he is a strong, strong rider. I mean, just an incredible, absolutely incredible pull for us, and continuously would push forward. And man, oh man, that guy has just a serious raw power. Um, and so that really came in handy for us because on these this long stretch in between the breakaway Bray and Glasgow, he was able to kind of push off the front a couple times, keep the pace going, and making sure that we are staying on terms with the Rhino riders if they do push up. Same thing with Streeter. He was just you know motoring on and kind of in a way almost seemed like it was a walk in the park for him because he's such a strong rider. um, Again, he has a strong 20-minute power. And so while I feel like at this point, I'm starting to really feel like I've got one good burst left. So we're talking about where we could potentially launch. And as we start to get into this climb, we realize that they must have initiated their talk and kind of thinking the same thing, like let's push off the front, let's make them work. And sure enough, they set out a strong attack, and so we have to push hard to catch up. And I felt like as much as I am not a fan of the matches analogy, I felt like I lit a bonfire with all the matches I had left to be able to stay on terms. And so Craig tells us, hey, just push through. So I push through and just keep going. And we, ultimately push a lot harder and try to get our top guys, rolling forward. But lo and behold, seeing Pavlik come up behind, that just signaled to us that, hey, they're not going to let us go and they're strong enough to keep up. So we kind of start to ease off a little bit. I end up easing off a little too much and, did my best to stay behind them. You see Pavlik starts to go up, and Barry ends up getting behind me for a second. And I feel like, as I'm pushing through into the cloud, I feel like Barry's going to go at any moment, but also at the same time, I feel like he's staying with me for a reason. I wasn't sure. So I was like, okay, I don't know where Barry's at in terms of ready to go, but I know that on the Clyde kicker I've got enough energy left to power up through this. And so I'm getting ready to go full send, drop my RPMs, and just kick it up as hard as I can up the Clyde. And when I saw that I had a few second gaps on Barry, I realized that I just need to keep pushing on because I don't want him to catch up as my pace increases. For me, this was kind of a chance to keep that gap going. And so right now I've got an 11-second gap on Gary, or 10-ish seconds. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, I know I can make it to the end and just get there without having to kill myself, and putting out. Because at this point, I was cooked, man. My legs were hurting, my lungs were hurting, my heart rate's in the 180s. I knew that, if I needed to sprint against Barry, I could, but thankfully I didn't have to. And so I'm looking at the group in front of me and I see I got, 6 seconds or so on Pavlik and Streeter. And I see them at the top of my screen. So I'm like, all right, I can push up to get them. I can push up to catch up to them. And if I can help Streeter beat Pavlik, then that would, ultimately allow us to get better points. But alas, I launched my power up, launched what I had left of a sprint, and couldn't catch them. So I just, cruised on through to the end. And boy, oh boy, was I happy to finish in fifth place, because that was a struggle. That last kilometer was, oh man, I gave it absolutely everything I had left. And thankfully, like I said, I didn't have to sprint for the finish, but we were able to take a strong commanding lead there at the end. You see, with three of our guys taking the podium, and then Pavlik, of course, because again, she was an absolutely incredible rider, and then myself crossing in fifth place. Barry in sixth place for Rhino. Ryan Trainer, which again, absolute motor, man. He is a fantastic, fantastic engine, and just really rode hard for a long time for us. And so I honestly, the guys that came in, after, I know that if it weren't for them, we would not have the commanding lead we did. And so I am especially appreciative of all the work they did, staying off the front, making sure those surges were closed down, allowing us to really have a strong control of this race. So there you go. That is the Dirty Crabs versus the Rhinos. And man, oh man, what an absolutely epic race. Absolutely excited. Great team, great event. And I will catch you guys on the next race.
Guys, Miguel, from that thing you just watched, if you know where that reference is from, please leave it down in the comments below. One of my favorite channels. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, watch videos, playlists, whichever pop up. But thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and I hope to see you next time.